Okay, good evening everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Fadi. I am the community manager at Seeqnce. So just a quick thing for those who don't know what Seeqnce is, it's a startup accelerator where internet startups, web and mobile, come, whether they have an idea, or they have a small team, or possibly even a prototype. And we help them and accelerate them during several months to help them get the product out, get funding, and move on to the next stage of their startup life cycle. Now, part of our work is to do community events like those. And tonight, it's the event called the Tech Ninjas event, the first edition of the Tech Ninjas event, where we have masters of the code coming in to talk about their field. So in terms of what's going to be talked about today, as you know, since the beginning of time, which is specifically January 1st, 1970, digital ninjas, have sought to improve their artwork and their art and their craft, to always learn new techniques. So there were many different clans that were created. The open source clans, the .NET clans, etc. PHP lovers, Java lovers. And recently, in the past few years, a new clan has surfaced, a new group of ninjas, Ruby on Rails ninjas. And since it's relatively new, there's still a lot of lack of knowledge about these guys or about the framework, about MVC in general. And we're very lucky to have today a master of the code, a master of the gem, Costa, with us, who has agreed to come from his secret hideaway and share with us the knowledge that he has gained. He's going to try and basically lure us into the red side of the force. So Costa is a very cool guy. He has studied in Lebanon and then moved on to the UK, where he started working in bioinformatics, basically, and in IT related to the research and academic communities. His current he's worked on, the product he's worked on a lot recently is called Life by a company called Macintosh. I think they're Dutch. They're Dutch. And it is basically a way to aggregate and help collaborate and share information related to scientific papers. And that product was built on Ruby on Rails. So really, Costa has extensive knowledge about that. And we're very lucky to have him. So without further ado, I present to you Costa and an introduction to Ruby on Rails.
Thank you, Fadi. Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks to Seeqnce, Fadi, and Rihan for the cool introduction. So tonight we're going to be talking about Ruby on Rails. This is going to be an introduction. So basically for people without any background knowledge about Rails or the framework or the MVC. So this is going to be a bit, like an introduction. So first of all, a bit about me. My name is Costa Nicolaou. You can call me Costa. I'm a software developer, mainly in Ruby. I've been in the PHP field before, COBOL, Java, and I work remotely for a company based in the UK, and we have a product called Papers. The company's name is Macintosh, so it resembles a lot like Apple's Macintosh by name. My Twitter handle is Seeqnce, and I push code to GitHub on Seeqnce also. Okay. So about Ruby, the creator is Yukihiro Matsumoto, called also Mats in short. Ruby was first released in 1995, and it's open source. So the idea that Mats had was he wanted to create, as he says, he wanted to create a better Perl and a more object-oriented small talk. So he came up with Ruby. Ruby remained relatively underused outside of Japan until Rails brought it to the light in 2003. And Ruby is cross-platform for people who are using Windows or don't use OS X or Macs. So it's available on all platforms. And one more thing about Ruby is that it has its own package manager, which is called Ruby Gems. So if you hear me referring to gem install or something, that's the Ruby Gems or package manager. About Rails, in a very quick way, elevator pitch. It's an open source web framework created by DHH, David Heinemann Hansen, in 2003. So basically, David, what he did, have you guys heard of Basecamp? Yeah. Okay, so he basically extracted Rails. He built Basecamp, and then he extracted Rails from Basecamp, and he outsourced it in 2003. And it's completely open source. You can download it, and you can see how it's written. You can change things. You can get a copy from GitHub, Rails, and the project name is Rails also. It's developed with happiness and productivity of developers in mind. So it kind of assumes few things on behalf of the developers, which we are going to talk about. Beautiful and readable syntax, thanks to Ruby. And favors convention over configuration. So for example, if we're working with a database backend, the table name should be a plural. It has a plural name of the class name. So for example, if we have a class name called post, the table name would, which Rails maps to is called posts. So these decisions are made on your behalf by Rails. And of course, the dry principle, which is don't repeat yourself. So developers should not be repeating anything twice. They can reuse the code anywhere in the application. So beautiful syntax, you say, really? I'll show you an example. This is a controller in Rails, which we are going to talk more about how controllers are laid out. But for example, can you see this? Can you see this well? Okay. So this is basically the class name, products controller, and it's inherited from application controller. And then you can see there's def means def. This is the scope of the method. Def index is a method called index. And the scope of it begins by def and ends on the end side. And inside it, you see the fifth line is products, product all. This is what Rails does for you. It kind of abstracts everything with simple syntax. For example, this returns all the products in the table and assign it to an instance variable called @products. At the lower bit, where I say display data in different formats, it reports using the same kind of block or the same method. It reports to different requests with different formats. For example, if somebody is using a JSON format to request the list of products, this method will respond to a JSON client. And if somebody wants an XML representation, it can also return an XML representation. So also, in the comments here where I say explicit format part of the URL, so it actually responds to products / this is an example of a URL. So /products/1 means that I want the product 1. So products is the resource I want from this application, and 1 is the ID. And if I say I want 1.xml, that means I want it in an XML format. So it returns an XML format. So you don't need to set up the headers in your request, for example, if you're using the browser. And of course, if you don't want to return all the records, you can specify the ID and say find by this ID, and it will return one object. So more on Ruby. Everything in Ruby is an object. And it's also dynamic, so no type declarations, as you saw. In the class, there was, we just assigned products instance variable with an array of products. And no brackets for simple method calls. So it's very, it's very easy to read. And also, the last statement of a method is automatically returned. So the last evaluation in a method, it's automatically returned. You don't need to write a return value inside the method. This is an example that I did a few minutes ago. So I fired the IRB, which is interactive Ruby. You can fire it from the terminal on your computer. So it loads Ruby. I defined a method. This is how dynamic it is. So def add number 1, number 2. The method name is add, and the arguments are number 1, number 2. And then inside the method, I say, I want number 1 to be added to number 2, or number 2 to be added to number 1. And then this will be returned. The and here is the end of the method definition. And then on the second line, I call the method, and I pass 1 and 5. And that returns 6. So as you can see, I don't have any return, explicit returns in my method definition. A bit on Ruby data structures. There are integers, range. This is how we write a range. It returns a range. I'm more interested in talking about arrays and hashes. You're going to be, if you're using Ruby and Rails, you're going to be using a lot of arrays and hashes. But these are few of the data structures that are available. This is exciting. So I wanted to show you how loops are written in different languages. So I picked PHP and Java. So the first one shows how to write a loop, a simple loop in Ruby. So you say 5 times and then do. You pass, this is a block. You pass your arguments, which is it prints hello world. And then, are you guys familiar with these methods, these loops? Okay? So this is how it's done in Ruby. This is how it's done in PHP. This is how it's done in Java. And then there's another way, an even simpler way to do it in Ruby, a one-liner. So instead of having do and end, you can just put the brackets. So this will print, this method will print hello world 5 times. Okay, so you ask, why Rails? And I say, well, everybody kind of agrees on that. So it's an easy, fast, and fun way to develop web applications. It follows the MVC model, architectural pattern. Are you guys familiar with MVC? Okay, cool. Predefined application structure, so convention over configuration. So it kind of makes these kind of decisions on your behalf. Rails was built with testing support in mind. So it wasn't a last-minute decision. It was originally thought of. And there's already, whenever you create a new Rails project, there's a test folder there. So you have to like kind of feel guilty if you don't write tests. And of course, it offers different environments within the same application. We're going to see an example of database.yaml, where you specify the settings for the data of the database for the production environment, the test environment, and any other environment, the development environment, for example. And you can run the tests in a different environment, all on the same code, all on the same repository. And you can simulate how it's going to be running in production and how it runs in development mode. And of course, there's the active community and lots of resources to learn from. But that's not all, really. There are also big names using Ruby on Rails. I've already mentioned Basecamp. Twitter was originally built on Ruby on Rails. Shopify, Yellow Pages, GitHub, Living Social, which recently bought the company GoNabbit, and Hulu, and of course Groupon. There's a larger list on rubyonrails.org applications that you can check.
What was the programming language that Twitter used after Ruby on Rails? You said originally developed on Twitter.
Well, they use different, I'll have to ask this at the end, if you don't mind, because they use different languages for different components now. Okay, so again, how does Rails work? A user comes to the browser. There's the dispatcher and routes that accepts. This is where all the red section is basically where Rails works. So the dispatcher and routes is the first interaction of the user with the application. So from the URL, Rails knows where to redirect the user and which controller to pick. Then it goes to the controller and find out if the user needs to pull out information or store information in the database. And this is handled by the model. Then it returns the results to the controller, which passes the results to the views, and again back to the user. So this is kind of the loop how Rails work. One of the core things about Rails is active record. Basically, it's the object relational mapping that is used on Rails. And I just happened to copy the ORM pattern definition from Wikipedia that quotes Martin Fowler. It's an object that traps a row in a database table and adds domain logic on that data. And that's exactly what active record does. Basically, active records classes are Ruby classes that are located under app models inside the application. One database table maps to one Ruby class. Attributes are columns, so all the columns in the database or in the table are mapped on the object that Ruby refers to, and they are attributes on that object. And it also, active record allows associations between different classes and objects. So, for example, a user has many blog posts. You can define this in your classes, in your active record classes. Okay, let's see some code. So let me explain a bit what I'm gonna do. Probably better. So we're gonna see our first, have you ever seen a Rails app being generated before? Okay, for those who, we didn't, I'm gonna generate a new application. I'm gonna specify two models, product model and a user model, and I'm gonna generate a scaffold, so it's gonna generate all the code for me. And with that, then we're gonna run the migrations, and we're gonna run the code. So we're gonna see it running in the browser. So the command line is kind of the interface where you define things in Rails and how you interact with your application. So Rails new is the command to create a new Rails application. And I'm gonna name it Intro to Rails. And then as you can see, all these files were created and directories. So I'm gonna cd into it and then open it. So this is the application that was generated by this line of code. This is the structure of a Rails app. Mainly all of the code is located here under app. So this is where the controllers go. Helpers, which help us define things in views. Manipulate views. Mailers for emails. Templates, etc. Models. And then views. And as you can see, there's nothing here. So we're gonna generate our first model. So Rails G is short for generate. And then I say scaffold, which means I want to generate the model, the controller, and the views. And please define the route that the application needs to know about so it redirects the users to the right controller. So product, and then I say title, string. So I'm defining the table's columns, and I'm defining the data type. Description, text. So obviously, a string is shorter than a text. A string it basically translates to varchar, and a text is a larger text in my table. So what does Rails create for me? It creates a migration, which we're going to have a look at. And creates a model called product. Sorry about that. Just a sec.
By the way, the only reason we couldn't film the entire screen is because he's using a Mac or a PC with a full screen. Just giving you guys.
So that's the controller that was automatically created. As you can see, I have predefined actions like the index, and then show for one resource, a new one to create a new one, edit, create. I can go into details about these later on if they're not clear. But basically, it's what you need to create new resources, delete, and manipulate your objects using Rails. So this is the controller. What about the model? So basically, this is my model. It just inherits from active record, as I was mentioning before. And my views that were created are here. So I have edit index to return all the records, edit to modify one record, new also, and show. Show to show one record. Do you remember the dry principle? Don't repeat yourself. So I'm going to show it in action here. As you can see, there's something called render form. And that basically uses, when you are creating a new product with a title and description or editing it, you're going to be using the same fields, like a text field for title and description, right? So with Rails, you don't need to define these two twice. You just have a partial that you reuse every time you want to edit or create a new record, which is here. And it has a title field and a description field. And this is called every time you load, edit, or new. Okay? What you're seeing here, the signs are what render is surrounded by is embedded Ruby. So it's the templating engine that Ruby uses. So this is how you can embed Ruby in HTML. Okay, let's create the second. Okay, that's my second object. Follows the same pattern. And one thing I did not show is the migration, are the migrations. So under DB, migrate is where the interaction of creating new tables, removing columns, adding columns, manipulating your data and the schema happens. So my first migration was create product. This is how you create product using Ruby, the table using Ruby. So I just need to run a command using the command line called rake db migrate, and it will run and create these tables. So that's for products, and that's for users. And as you can see, there's something also called, it's defined inside methods. So the migration up, which creates a new table, is defined in self up, which is a class method. But basically, when you call migrate, it calls this method automatically. And by the same, the same way, you can just delete your table by calling the down version, rake db down, and specifying which version, and that will drop your table that was initially created using this migration. So now I'm gonna run the rake db migrate. And the output says that products table was created and the users tables was also created. Before firing up our server, I'm just gonna show you what Rails added in the roots file. So under config, there are a couple of files here that you just need to edit. You don't need to create anything else. Rails already creates everything on your behalf. So for example, the database.yaml, there are multiple environments, and it already make the assumption that you're going to be using SQLite, that you don't have any database running on your development machine. So it runs SQLite 3, and you can change that, of course. But for now, what we use to create our tables, we use development under the DB folder. So it's an SQLite table database that we used. When we run our test, we use these settings, and of course you can change them, so it will not corrupt your production or development data. And there's also the roots file. As you can see, this is a bit of an advanced topic, but I'm going to briefly talk about it. So when you say resources, like it's defined at the top, resources users and resources product, that means Rails already knows where to find users or products using the URL. So you just need to specify to say /users, and it automatically knows that you're requesting to return a full list of users. If you specify /users new, like we're going to see, it knows that you're asking for a new record to be created or to be loaded. So now that we run the migration, we're going to fire up the server. So Rails also comes with a server. It's just a development web server, and you can run it using Rails server or Rails S, space S. And it runs by default on port 3000, so you can request it using localhost, column 3000. That's our Rails application. This is how you know that your application is up and running. You get this page as on the default URL. So let's say I want to, I created products and I created users. So when I type /users, I'm expecting to see a list full of users, which is exactly what I get, but I don't have any. So I'm going to create my first one, and I'm going to name it Fadi. Yeah, cool. So user was successfully created. So we have our first user. And back to the list here, we can see that, Fadi is listed. So a second user would be Samber. And again, that's how Samber is listed. Looking at the URL, I'm requesting the root that with users and then specifying the ID of the object that was created, which is 2 in this case. Same thing goes for products. So a list of products you can create and delete and edit, etc. So, any questions so far? Okay. So, associations, you can, using Active Record, you can define the association between products and users. So you can say one user has one product or has many products. So you can specify this under Active Record. There are validations that come free with Active Record also that make sure that no record is saved before being valid. And callbacks, like you can call additional code on after save or before save or after modification of records. Another one is active view. So this is how ARB looks like, embedded Ruby, like we saw earlier in the views. So this is basically a list of people, and there's a loop. You can see people, each person, unless the first name. And there's also the forms. So there are forms use like code to generate additional code, like we saw with render earlier. So the forms helpers, they help you generate the right text field, the right image, a file uploader, etc. And then they are translated to HTML. Then when you submit the form, it's passed as parameters. And then Active Record checks and validates the attributes and then save the record. Back to papers. So this is basically the original product that we are working on at my company. So papers helps organizing your files and your research papers. So you don't have something like this in your office. So we try to avoid people having something similar. So again, Life, which is the product that I'm responsible for and I work on, is basically the collaborative component of Papers app. Papers app is a Mac application. So it's a native Mac application. It doesn't come by default with all the it doesn't connect people and researchers and users together. So we figured out the best way to connect these people is to use a cloud solution, and we called it Live. And it's based on, it's built using Ruby on Rails. So Live basically connects from Macs, iPads, iPhones, and other devices that we choose to run papers on. And we don't need to modify the code on the server for this to happen because, it just works with APIs. So Papers Live, organize and share papers using Live collections. It allows micro comments and reviews and ratings on papers. So no matter the device you are using or you have papers on, you can comment and switch. For example, if you're using your iPad, papers on iPad, and you comment on a certain paper, you switch back to your Mac, and your comment is over there also. Send and receive papers recommendations. So we know your field of research or job title, and we try and recommend papers for you. And it adds collaboration to existing workflow. So researchers and people who are using Papers app, they don't need to disrupt their workflows or learn something additional. It is just an add-on. So it contributes to their workflow positively, hopefully. So Papers under the hood, it's based on Ruby on Rails. It has private APIs to Papers app. So this is how we connect to the cloud. Different representational formats based on request types, like I mentioned before, XML, JSON, HTML. And it allows recommending papers to users based on several criteria. So we do we do collect data from the users, and we try and recommend something for them based on the data collected. An example of an API is a controller, isn't the controller. So in this example, I'm trying to return the publicly available collections ordered by members, and then I'm paginating them. So using Ruby, I can call this using collection public ordered by members method on collection, and then call on top of it, call paginate and pass parameters to it. So all in one liner. And the method in the backend on the model side, it just understands what it needs to do and returns an array full of records. Consuming the API using CURL. So this is how we consume or test our APIs. So you kind of need a username and password. And that's about it, really. We just pass the header like XML, and it returns an XML if it's successful. And yeah, one more thing, which is, well, that's really what I have to say for today about introduction to Ruby, except for one more thing. So we're going to have a Q&A session if you have any questions, and if you have any feedback, just let me know. So about the one more thing, today Steve Jobs passed away. So, and I thought the best way to remember Steve Jobs is to remember what he told everybody at the Stanford commencement in 2005. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thank you.
I did not expect that.
That's because you don't have enough iPhone, which is much faster. You see, it's a lot faster than you.
So we're going to start the Q&A session now. Anybody have any questions? Don't hesitate.
I have a quick question. Everything you did, I mean, I know that this is kind of a rhetorical question, but did you prepare it, or could anyone who's dabbling into Ruby on Rails have done what you did and had the same outcome within the 15 minutes that you did it in? As in, all you did was write a bit of code and you ended up with an app, a working app.
Was it a fake demo?
Was it a fake demo, a rigged demo, or was it a real
it
demo?
was all generated live here. Everybody can do it.
So you didn't actually pre-prepare to make it look easier?
No, I did not.
Because
it is that easy. This is why Rails is so popular. It's how fast you can get a prototype up and running. So yeah, this is what you can do.
Can we get the lights on so that we can see each other?
Sorry? Yeah, please.
Yeah. What don't you like about Ruby on Rails?
What? I don't know. To be honest, I don't think I don't like anything about Ruby on Rails. In fact, maybe how fast they're moving, so people are not catching up enough. There are too many things changing between each version, and that's probably what I hate the most. Like there are applications in production, and it takes a bit of time to get them up to speed with new released gems and libraries. So this is what I think I hate the most.
So if I'm not mistaken, you come from a PHP background, and then you move into Rails. Now obviously prototyping on Rails is faster than prototyping on whatever framework you're using for PHP, because Rails was designed for fast prototyping. But now that you know infinitely both, are there, when you're building an application or working on an existing one, are there things on the Rails framework that you have to worry about that weren't in the that you didn't worry about when you were building on a PHP framework? Things like perhaps performance, things like scalability, things like that. Is there anything that's really different? Because I'm trying to basically balance out. I mean, it's faster to prototype with Rails, but on the other side, on the other hand, what gives? I mean, what's the problem with it?
Yeah, I think to be honest, I haven't worked on large scale app on using PHP. So I've done only this on using Rails. And I have to say, you hear a lot of people saying, Rails don't scale, or doesn't scale. It's useless when large number of people are accessing the server, etc. But it's actually not the case. It depends what you are using Rails for. And Rails is not a solution for every problem that you are trying to solve with building a web app. So you really need to assess your priorities and what you are trying to do with Rails or any other framework, and go for it.
How do you know what works on Rails and what doesn't?
You kind of you need to know what you're trying to build, right? So if you're trying to do something fast to show investors, and you already have the layout, then Rails is your ally. You can easily prototype something in a couple of days. But if you're trying to build a system with different components, or running something in the background that computes large amount of data, Rails might not be built for that. It's not built for that, so you might be using something else.
So it's a it's an internet entrepreneur's language, basically.
Yeah.
So we're all going to be millionaires after this session.
I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like how easy it was to create the database automatically from your classes. But is there a standard way to handle versioning? For example, suppose we did this and then want to create version 2 of our application. How is the database creation and migration handled between versions? We have.
Yeah. That's a very good question. But did you also mean that you have two databases that you're working with, or you're changing your schema?
I'm changing my schema basically. I want to upgrade all my customers to the new database. And is this handled automatically, or should I be careful not to destroy previous data, previous tables, previous stuff?
Yeah, you definitely need to be careful. But Rails handles migrations in a versioned way, so you can roll back. You can. It doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't keep track of the data. So if you migrate your table with users and say email column is going to be renamed email address, it's fine, the data is still there. But if you're wiping out your data, then Rails can't do anything about that.
But you can change column names as
absolutely.
Automatically it knows that it's not going to destroy everything instructions.
It's actually very easy, and it keeps track of which migration version you used to do that, so you can go back in time and change that.
You didn't cover how we're actually modifying views. From what I know so far, we have Ruby on Rails, PHP, a little Java, JavaScript. They all really come down to just each one's cater to a specific type of programming, but the views aspect is always neglected.
I wouldn't necessarily say neglected. I just wanted to show how Rails makes few decisions on your behalf, like creating a form that is very basic to create a new record or to edit a new record, but you can definitely change all this. But of course, you need to follow certain standards, and most of the time, users spend their time, or software developers or Rails developers, they spend most of their time working with the views and optimizing those views. So
that is the bulk of the work.
you're right. I did not cover much of it, but I was hoping to show how Rails creates this for us.
Another question, actually, if you don't mind. How is Rails evolving? What's next? Because you said you're moving really fast. What's your vision for the Rails framework?
Yeah.
If something that regular models can understand.
Well, Initially, when Rails was designed and developed, as I said, it was extracted from Basecamp, and it has evolved a lot since. So with Rails 3, there were two kind of schools, let's say. People that wanted more flexibility with Rails, like they didn't want Rails to make all the decisions on their behalf. And people who were quite happy with how Rails is at the moment. So those people merged their efforts together with Rails 3. And now we are at the stage where Rails 3.1 is about to be released. So it's becoming more modular. So everything is being, it's being stripped away from many of the libraries that comes baked into it. And then it's up to the developer to decide if he wants to use MySQL as a backend and include the libraries for that, or use, for example, Sass for the front end, for the CSS, or HAML for the templating engine. So it's up to the developer to decide on all this. So these are the latest changes to Rails 3.1.
I was going to ask, is there an IDE for Rails?
There's a preferred IDE on Mac OS X, which is called TextMate, which the one that you saw me using. There's E for, which is basically TextMate is just a text editor, so you can use Vine or Vim or Notepad.
NetBeans.
It's a
NetBeans.
NetBeans.
6.9.
Yeah, so you can use any any text editor or any tool
That's
you want.
edited, but there are no IDEs for this. For example, the NetBeans instead it has
Yeah,
a base framework, and there's Eclipse that has a plugin for Dana Rails that does everything.
Yeah, you're right. So all the commands that you saw me running, like typing them, those are baked into those IDEs. Just happens that I don't use them. So by all means, you can use them. They make your life so much easier.
What about using Rails with, let's say you want to use Rails because you like it, etc. But you want to use Amazon system, so you want to run on an EC2 Amazon instance, store things on S3, etc. Does it lend itself well for that sort of?
Yeah, it runs very well on Linux distributions. And one thing that's for a more advanced session. But Rails runs behind, a web server, which can be Apache, which can be there's a list of web servers that you can check out. But yeah, it runs very well on Amazon, on EC2, and it integrates very well with S3, SES, which is the emailing or notification service from Amazon. In fact, we use all this on our platform. So our platform, Live, uses all of the stack on Amazon mainly. And we use also RDS, which is the MySQL service from relational database service from Amazon. So we use that too, and it works amazingly well.
How about what happened with Twitter? You said you would answer it later.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So with Twitter, well, they moved away from having Twitter orbit on Ruby on Rails, so they were getting like loads of requests per second, and Rails was just not built to answer all those requests. So it was a bit challenging for them. So they tried to approach things differently by offloading or caching the requests using working like queue value stores and memcache. They tried different solutions and then they moved away. I'm not sure about what they are currently using for all their platform, but I'm sure that they are still using Ruby on Rails for the back end of Twitter. So for example, when you log in to change your image or name, that's probably Rails.
Just a quick note. We have this saying in Seeqnce: if you get that big, it's a good problem to have. So Twitter built this on Rails. They did it very quickly. They got a lot of investors. They had, I don't know, 50 million, 30 million, 25 million users, and then it broke. And everybody's like, oh my God, Rails sucks.
Failing well.
And my first reaction was, you do realize they have 25 million users. So they got to 25 million on Rails. Okay? Then they spent a year rewriting the code so that it could handle 100 and, how many are they now? 150 to 100 million?
I'm not aware of the number. But
Over 100 million. So the lesson is, don't always look for the optimal solution in the context of, I don't know if you're all coders, in the context of what the technology is, look for the optimal solution for now. There's a very big difference between one and the other. You could have written this entire thing in maybe C++, okay? But that would have taken, I'd say, a week. He did it in 15 minutes. So just take that into consideration. This isn't really a pitch for the best technology out there. So it's the best technology out there to build web apps rapidly so that you can go to an investor and say, this is what it does, this is how it's going to do it. We have 10,000 users, give me $500,000 to take it to the next level.
And to continue on Sam's point, developers in Lebanon or in the region can ask themselves, well, I mean, why should I spend a lot of time learning Rails when there's so little support or following or requirement for it in this region? However, Costa actually works for a company in the UK, and he's based here. And the reason for that is that Ruby on Rails developers are in very high demand, in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and North America. I mean, being a Rails developer was described by the former, he's now the director of the MIT Media Lab, Joey Torito. It's like gold. If you're a very good Ruby on Rails developer, you can make a huge amount of money working for some of the best startups in the world, because it's such a high in-demand framework for web and mobile. So you can also keep that in mind if you ever think about, well, should I invest my time in learning it? Well, possibly yes, and you can work from a distance like Costa did with us.
yeah,
One question.
absolutely.
Usually when things are this easy to get done, you tend not to have too much control. Can you actually control the things that it creates? Can you go as far as memory management?
Absolutely. I've mentioned a couple of large companies or big names already using Ruby on Rails. Like, for example, last time I was at a conference where Groupon were presenting how they scaled Groupon. You know how Groupon grew fast. So it was like that they needed to get more developers to help get the work done. And I think yes, you can control how things are. Even if you don't, you're gonna fail once, you're gonna fail twice, but you're gonna learn something. And that something is something new that you did not know about. So that's kind of cool.
I'm just asking because I just took up iOS development recently, and the more you program, you realize that there's so many things happening that you don't know about.
Yeah, there is a
So
certain
it's-
level of
it's
abstraction. Yes,
Really
you're right.
annoying.
But that's what Fadi just said. Like, there's a learning curve. You need to get to know. You can't just say I'm a good developer by scratching the surface. You have to go deep. You have to look into the source code, how things are written.
You actually have access to it.
Yeah, of course, it's open source. That's the beauty of it. It's like knowledge available to everybody, and it's just people who really want to know how things work to have a look at. And you can even, you guys can even contribute to Rails. There's you can check out the code, have a look at it, see if you can contribute, and then push a pull request. Eventually the developers can check out your changes and see if they are good. With a good reason, it will be merged. So there you go. I've actually done it on a couple of gems and libraries. So for example, I'm using I'm using something that was created by Twitter. It's called WorkLink, and it's a client that runs on inside the application, and it monitors a queue, a remote queue, SQ on Amazon, and it checks if there are any messages, and pulls the messages every time they are on the queue, and processes them inside the application. So while I was upgrading the application to Rails for 3.0, I figured that the gem or the library was not upgraded. So I forked a copy using GitHub, made the changes, and then put it back there so people can use it.
Is everyone here a developer? Can we see a show of hands, or is everyone too? It's too late to see a show. Everyone's a developer. Okay. And maybe I should sit up front because you're all gonna have neck. Sorry. No, not interrupting you. I want to see. This session is our first technical session. I don't know if any of you are ninjas, but it would be really cool if you were. Okay? In reality, what we mean by tech ninjas is people who really, really master the art of something. Okay, and many people will say that code is an art, so that's where the tech ninja comes in. Costa doesn't look like a ninja. Okay, but you should see him with the ninja suit on. He really blends in. I have a couple of questions. Most of you most likely don't know what Ruby is. Okay, you all have your versed maybe in .NET and Java and PHP or something. What are your opinions on potentially? What are your opinions on what you've seen and how this may help you in your own endeavors, whether you're employees, whether you have projects, whether let's get a bit of maybe some feedback here, because it would be very interesting to see. It would be very interesting to just get a feel for who's here, what the ideas are. Does this empower you, or is it just one of these lame-ass sessions? No offense to Costa. Okay. Is there something you feel that you has inspired you? And on the next level, do you think that you would like to build something with this? Okay. This is the ultimate question, because this was the intro to Ruby. They make me use this, but it's just so that we're recording. Okay. This is the intro to Ruby, but in reality, we are trying to create a Ruby community in Lebanon. Ruby is what they use in Silicon Valley. It's what they use in the tech triangles all over the world to create those $100 million startups. I'm not promising you $100 million startups, but I feel that if we want to create rapidly and create and be creative in our efforts, okay, this might be an interesting community to have in Lebanon. Any ideas from the audience, okay, on whether this is relevant, whether you like it, whether you'd like to take it to the next level in more in-depth workshops? We're not talking about, this is not, can we make a buck off of you? So don't think that way. Think more, can we build the community? And if we can build the community, I'm sure we can find a way to do that to everyone's benefit. So, ideas, thoughts? Someone throw yourself out there. Maybe Ali can throw himself out there. Ali has a new startup, so maybe, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not a developer, probably I'm the only non-developer here, I guess. But I came here interested in, I'm the founder of the project I'm working on. I have no technical experience, but I always was wondering what languages to work on when I'm working with my developers. That's why I decided to come here, and Frida and Ryan are my developers working with me. And I think it's really great to whether it's having a community for the Ruby or other kinds of communities. I think it's really helpful, especially that with all the startups. Lately in the region, especially in Lebanon, I would have liked. The workshop was pretty technical. I would also liked a little bit more an outsider perspective on it. So me as a non-technical person, as someone who's trying to make strategic decisions rather than technical decisions, you touched a little bit about that, talking about efficiency.
Do you have a specific question for Costa since he's here? His hour is $250, so you're getting it for free now.
Well, yeah, well, that's my specific question. As a strategic thinker, rather than a technical thinker, how would you like me to decide on what is the most efficient language or languages to use when building a project?
What is the answer to the ultimate question?
Yeah,
42.
Yeah, I think I'm a Ruby on Rails developer, so I'm just gonna say go and do it in Ruby on Rails. But that's not gonna happen, You have to look at your options. You have to see how much time you have on your hands. You're starting, developers are starting probably from, they're having a fresh look on how to use Ruby on Rails. And, the skills required, what you want to achieve. Rails can help you a lot. And you can get something up and running very quickly. I mean, if you guys heard of, if you've heard of KPHP or Symfony on PHP, those are clones of Ruby on Rails. And with all respect, they're not even close to the, how fast things are in Rails. So my answer is you really have probably prepare a list and see what you want to achieve and evaluate the technology. And it's something, it's a business decision. I can probably help answering how fast you can get up and running, but I can't tell you which technology to go after.
Maybe what, because I'm in the same case actually as Ali, not advanced as he is. I haven't got a team yet. But what I've heard from the people I asked is that no matter what programming language you decide to go, it's going to be related to whether you find the people in the right team. There's definitely must be an expert in one language, but provided you find that team, else you go with the programming language that this team knows. And then ultimately changing or moving to another programming language is easy. It's not as difficult as you think. I'm not a tech guy as well. So how do you think, how easy do you think it is to move eventually, if we start with Ruby on Rails, to another programming language, if we find along the way that Ruby on Rails is not anymore fulfilling our needs, or the other way around, if we start with something else other than Ruby on Rails, moving at some point in time to Ruby on Rails?
If you start with something and you move back to Ruby on Rails, I'm not going to promise it's going to be, an easy switch, but it is easier than switching from Ruby on Rails to different platforms. I've mentioned that I've worked. I've worked before on porting legacy apps into Rails apps. So there were like Java apps, like really old Java apps that have very complicated database at the back end. And I've managed to extract data and clean the data and get something up and running using Ruby on Rails in like a couple of months. And that was something very interesting to do with Ruby on Rails. So switching to Ruby on Rails, I promise that it's going to be a lot more easier than switching from Ruby on Rails to something else. Yeah.
Okay, since we have a smaller team here, what about your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I'm really interested in learning Ruby on Rails now. I just want to check it out first if I can learn it fast so that I can implement it on the project. Or is it faster to already use the languages I know instead of learning a new language and starting something new? That's what I want to check out. Okay, cool.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but we write on everything here. What do you know? What languages do you know?
.NET languages, VB, .NET, ASP.NET, Seeqnce.
How is it to get back to the original framework we were working on? Like we're going with PHP for like 3 months and then suddenly we switch to Ruby. That switch should be easy because it's easy to start up with Ruby because everything is there. But if you want to switch back to another language or another platform, how hard would it be to actually do that conversion? Do you start from scratch, or do you just take the concept and the algorithms and then you copy them? What exactly do you, how do you go back to switch?
How you go back and switch, it depends on what you are switching to or back to. I think if you take a decision to go with a framework for the good points of it, knowing what are going to be the challenges, and you invest time into developing and solving your problems using this framework, you shouldn't be thinking about switching back unless it's something really critical, like something like really huge and big that can be solved in different. Yeah, once you choose a framework, there must be a really big, like a reason for you to switch.
Go back.
Yeah.
This is one of the problems you shed light on. It's, you have an issue. When you hit 100 million users, you're going to have some issues.
100 million users.
Yeah, in long term. I'm not asking for like 3 months.
That's what.
When you have that problem,
Yeah, I don't want to have that problem. I don't want to be in a place where I'm going to have problems.
But let me answer that question. Let me be the one to answer. Again, engineers think long term, okay? And this is a good thing. However, if you're trying to be a startup, if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, you have $10,000 to last you 3 months, okay? You're eating ramen noodles, okay? And you're driving your car on neutral, okay, uphill. You most likely aren't going to think about 100 million. You're going to think about how can I get past that $10,000 line, which means how can I get to my investors so I can raise $250,000. And the investor yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the investor isn't going to come and tell you, oh my God, you wrote this in Ruby, you should have written this in C++.
You're not going to tell me.
He's going to look at it. It works, great. Do you have some users? Great. Does it break every second? No, hopefully not. Therefore, I'm going to give you $250,000. So don't really, I mean, you can build bridges and skyscrapers, but we're not building bridges and skyscrapers.
Yeah, there's something I have to apologize for not mentioning this before, and it should have been on the list of why Rails. Rails help developers and business owners to change and iterate and be agile in developing and adding more features. So if you have your base products, you want to add a new feature. It's so flippin' easy to add this new feature on the existing code and get things scale. It's got everything into a Rails repo. So that's one of the main advantages of.
So you can just add things to your
to your existing. Yeah, adding features is so simple. Dropping things and adding, manipulating, modifying things is just so simple and easy.
Just a question. Any good tutorials or books you read?
Did we turn off this? Yeah, I've got a list here. There's a website called railscasts.com. It's got plenty of videos that goes into details of each feature of Rails and how to do search, for example, how to modify views.
Is your presentation going to be available?
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
So.
And the slides, and there's a video, right?
Yeah. The video is going to go online, so you can see the slides themselves and any questions. We can do it. We can put it all in a blog post, and you guys can comment your questions. I'm sure we'll be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And send you any links relevant information.
I also have something that might save you a bit of time downloading videos from Railscast. There's like 250 or 300 videos there. I already have them all, so I can provide these videos for you on DVDs if you want to watch. So,
is there any
question? How well does Ruby merge with another language, let's say PHP? And if we were to build a product based on both, what elements would you suggest to go where?
Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of my current work. We have a Mac product which is built using Objective-C and Cocoa. And the only way it interacts with Ruby on Rails is through APIs. So yes, you can build APIs and interact with any language, any other language you want or you wish. You can just, it's the right way of building your application, and then everything is so easy to get access to.
So are there any questions in the back? Everyone seems very silent.
No, I have an opinion. I think Ruby on Rails would be great for people who are starting to learn web programming because it's a great thing to have. But for all the people who are set in their old ways like us, we're kind of stuck with our bad ways for a long time. It's not easy to change.
There's something called electroshock therapy. I think you can answer this.
Yeah, I do have an answer. I think it's, if you don't know what you're doing with Rails, again, it makes a lot of decisions on your behalf. So for new programmers, they might not know what HTML5 is, and Rails 3 already starts using Rails 5, HTML5, and already uses these in forms or ERB. So, no, you kind of like need both. I have to say.
كنت بيسألوا على الكوميونتي. You want to establish a community,
Yeah.
Ruby community here. إنه في خطة لحتى يبلش واحد يشتغل على الكوميونتي ولا؟
I think the best communities start with people who have goodwill and who want to share information. I mean, it's all about goodwill and sharing the knowledge.
يعني مثلا ما في tutorial classes بعدين إنه يشتغلوا على product معين مع بعض.
Well, one thing that we were very interested in, and this is basically an introduction to Ruby, is that Costa is more than willing to have a more advanced workflow and to really sit down and start going through the programming elements and the framework, etc. So this is basically the first time we do this, and the idea was to see how much interest there is, and if there's enough interest, I'm sure Costa will be more than happy to give more advanced workshops.
Especially that he's based here, right?
Yeah.
He's here. So use those evaluation sheets, just put on your thoughts, and if you are interested in workshops, write that down. We have all of your emails. If you didn't register, write your email as well, and we'll start the ball rolling.
Control me, you're talking about a community, about establishing a community. How many people actually use Rails, if you go on Rails here in London?
I know, I'm not one person.
Okay, that's one.
That's a very good question. There's, but I think I know at least one company. You've heard of Watwit? You've heard of Toot? Iqbis, the Jordanian startups, and they are already using Rails. There's also Naharnet using Ruby on Rails, and there's of course Muna Assad, which you're going to be hearing about soon. It's using Rails in production on a large scale.
So it's a very, very successful internet startup that does e-tendering. It's based out of Abu Dhabi. One of whose co-founders is right there. And Muna Assad came and decided, you know what, Lebanon is an amazing place to work as a startup. So they're also going to be working out of Lebanon, actually out of Seeqnce. A, there are amazing startups and they're moving to Lebanon, and B, they believe in the power of Ruby. They believe in Ruby on Rails. So don't be shy in getting involved. And again, we're going to make all of this data available online. The videos, Costa's information, Costa's data, etc. And let's just get the ball rolling. I mean, let's start doing it, let's start sharing, let's start doing it. It's not rocket science. And you guys can be the new masters of the, or the ninjas, whatever you're going to call yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, I don't know.
We're going to second thing.
Afterwards, how can they ask these questions?
Well, I mean, if we all have your emails, what we're going to do is we're going to, if you don't mind, share your email.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he is on Twitter, so @Seeqnce. So you have to kind of shut down. Sorry? Seeqnce. Seeqnce.
So yeah, just ping me and with your question, or if you want, we can meet up and do some coding.
Oh, you.
Yeah. Constantine. Without
So just a quick note to everybody. Can I get everybody's attention? Because we're trying to build a community, we've decided at Seeqnce to do something called the Seeqnce, to create something called the Seeqnce League. Okay? There was this really, really bad movie called The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Okay? I'm sure none of you ever visited the man or check and hide. But effectively, maybe that. So the idea of the Seeqnce League is effectively anybody who fits our very specific criteria can become a member of the Seeqnce League. The Seeqnce League has access to the Seeqnce space from Monday to I think Saturday, I'm not sure, from 6 p.m. to midnight. It's an open
Open source.
No, it's an open membership. You get access to the green space and the orange space if there's no workshop taking place. You can actually meet here, hack here, code here, ideate and so on. Okay. It's an application form. We can't admit everybody, but we would like everyone here to at least, if you're interested, apply. It will give you access to literally everything that we do, including the network that we are in. We want to build a strong community of entrepreneurs, and I believe anyone who was able to listen to Costa talking about Ruby on Rails and coding on a big screen can handle eventually filling out an application. Okay? So if you're interested, we're printing out the application forms now. We have a printer problem as usual. So, okay, but otherwise, I don't know if this is done, but thank you for all for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Big applause for.
Thank you.